Thanks for joining today. My name is Rich Portlands. I am the host of the EdGate Powers podcast, and today I'm excited to be joined by Will Gordon. I'll let Will introduce himself, but we do these podcasts periodically to explore what's happening in the education market, what changes are afoot, and how we can all help one another to succeed in this. A lot of trying and changing times. So without further ado, Will, can you give the audience an introduction?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. As Rich said, I'm head of sales for BOOKR Class. Head of sales really encompasses both our partnerships that we have around the world as well as our U.S. sales. So it kind of is a big, broad role in scope. But I'm based in Durham, North Carolina, where I grew up and then ended up living abroad for about a decade. Um, I'm actually the son of two primary school teachers, both reading teachers, in fact. So the platform that I work with is BOOKR Class is a reading platform, and so that's kind of very close to my heart and really fun to work on every day. I also taught English before I got into business and ed tech. So I come from this to my role with sort of that background as well. I've been in ed tech for about 15 years, working with startups, large publishers, domestic and international companies. And so kind of runs the gamut of experiences I've had. Yeah, excited to talk about the US market and ed tech and all things education.
Oh, that's fantastic, Will. And so if we go look at, I mean, there's a ton of questions about your past, but looking at Booker as a company, where is it based out of? Where do you guys come from?
Sure. So Booker is we're just about 10 years old as a company, and our core team is based out of Budapest, Hungary. So our founder is from Budapest. The company was founded by a husband and wife who wanted to create a new and unique online experience for reading, with a particular attention towards children with attention deficit disorder and learning disabilities, dyslexia, and other things like that. So the company really was focused very specifically on creating a format that would be most beneficial to students in terms of comprehension and engagement. And from that format, which is the Booker format, um, BOOKR Class was born, which is a classroom platform with teacher account and tracking capabilities. And then the core of the platform is the student reading app, where students can read, select from over 1,000 titles and read and work on their reading skills and their English language learning skills. So the company is based in Budapest, but we have team members throughout the world. We work with schools on all continents. We have some work we do directly to consumers online, and then the core of what we do is working with schools and teachers and students in the K-12 space.
If you're an ed tech company out there and you're listening to this podcast, it's for you as you listen to Will. You might catch a little glimpse of something that might be familiar. You know, companies that are born abroad and coming into the U.S. market, or if you're a U.S. market trying to go abroad. What we're trying to discover in talking to Will and his company are some of the challenges that are out there and that ed tech companies and publishers face, and how Booker is overcoming these challenges in order to find some success as they delve into the markets and try to sell their product. You know, as Will's talking about, Booker is a product meant for student reading, students with certain challenges that they're facing. And so, Will, as you guide your team into new markets, why don't you help us to define what some of the major challenges or roadblocks are, and how how you approach those?
Yeah. I think I might take it global and then bring it really local. I think globally, or when you have a product that's really exciting, especially when it's a really great product. Sometimes the hardest challenge will be that you want to start everywhere. You want to serve everyone and you want to go in every market and be everywhere. And I think the first and most important task is to really clearly define your market or your audience. Who are you really serving? Um, are you serving English language learners? Are you serving international schools? Are you serving native English speakers? And so I think that's really important in whatever you are doing is making sure that you're pinpoint precise around who you want to serve. And then from there, you can kind of begin to broaden and expand so that you can serve more and more kids. And so for BOOKR Class, I think one of our um, unique ways in which we were uniquely positioned was our founders were English language learners. They were non-native speakers. And so if you walked into our office and our team of editors and animators and academics and our marketing team and our tech team, they're all speak English very well. They're very fluent in English, but they all have that firsthand experience of what it's like to learn English. And so I think that is a great benefit when you're developing a product is to have empathy for your audience and your customer and to be able to develop really for them. So I think it's been sort of a passion project. It started as a passion project for our founder Dorca because of a very intimate relationship with this subject and this topic. And then it's grown from there. So I think that's the initial thing is have relevancy to yourself, to what you're building and creating, and then being very specific about who you want to serve.
Okay, so by being specific to who you want to serve, uh, does that limit the market for you?
Yeah, I think that would be the initial kind of response or feeling is am I limiting myself to the market? Can we serve university students and preschoolers? If I'm only focusing on, the K through 8 market, then what am I leaving on the table or not considering? And I think you do have to make choices initially. You have to make choices around what types of partnerships you make. You have to, as a small company, part of your goal has to be to scale because that's how you're going to make, your business work. But I think you have to make choices. But I think sometimes the false assumption is that if I go too narrow, then my attainable market is going to be too small. The truth is that even if you narrow your initial market to um, English language learners in the K through 4 space who have learning challenges. Two things happen. One is the product you design is very specific to them, and so the value you bring to them is sort of there's a multiplying effect that's even higher. The second effect is that actually probably what you create can have a broader audience, but because you're so focused and specific, it's received well. And so I think that it can be a false assumption that narrowing too far is a bad decision, where I think it's very important.
Well, there's also certain barriers that come up, right? As you look at these markets and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to go into the K through 4 market and you're going to serve a specific type of learner. Um, you as a company have to meet certain requirements in order to step
Mhm.
into that district or that state, correct? And I would imagine that by meeting those requirements, once you've met them, you have a learning process that can be applied as you expand your market.
That's right. Yeah. So when it comes to standards or learning requirements, this is where, as a company, we focused and then we've kind of brought in. So when we first created the platform, we aligned the books to the European framework because that was mostly the market we were in. We started in Europe. We expanded actually into the Middle East, into Turkey and other markets in the region. And for those schools and the textbooks they were using and the school curriculum they were using, the Common European Framework for language learning was the most relevant framework. Then we began to broaden and work with American international schools, and we found that the Lexile framework was very important. So Lexile framework for assessing text complexity, but also student complexity. And so we added Lexile measurements to our books, and we also added a Lexile placement test to our product. And then as we shifted towards entering the US market, we had to, one could say, expand or kind of broaden the measurements or the alignments we had in our platform to be focused in the US market. And so that's where we started partnering with EdGate and integrated the curriculum planner so that you could search our books based on state standards, based on different Common Core standards, but really specifically state by state standards and which books in the platform could work on that. So that was a way in which we started focused, we broadened, but then as we broadened, it allowed to have certain levels of focus for example, the US market.
And when you were making that decision, I'm just kind of curious to understand why you chose EdGate at that point in time. What was it about EdGate that made sense for Booker?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think there were a couple things. I think one was the consultative approach that EdGate took. Just it seemed to me and to us that EdGate really had a level of expertise and understanding in this area, and it's continuing to research in this area and be up to date on the latest trends of where standards are going and shifting. I think the second component was the simplicity with which we were able to implement the curriculum planner as well. And then I think we also saw that as we expand into the U.S. market, there are opportunities to make that the standards alignment work we do with EdGate kind of expand. So there are different levels or ways we can work with EdGate.
I appreciate that. When you were talking about being specific, really honing in, and while some people might consider that being limited, the more you dig into a certain area, if you're going into that K-4 marketplace and you're looking at a certain learner, right? You develop that expertise, and then, as you said, you're more valued. And I think EdGate took that same approach with standards. We could do a lot more, but being really focused on standards has allowed them to I think be perceived or more valued because they do things so deeply and thoroughly when it comes to their repository. Not only is it the biggest, but it's the most comprehensive in terms of how they process the standards and augment them with metadata and open GUIDs and things of that nature, and then how they deliver those standards and trying to allow people to be able to have access and then also to
Yeah.
align to anything, any state or any other country. So,
Yeah.
it kind of that resonates with me.
Mm.
And I think with the field is, how do you become specific? How do you really build expertise? And so when Booker started to develop the product and started to get into some states, are you looking at a process of going from state to state or from district to district? What does the growth strategy look like?
Yeah. Well, I think the first important part of our strategy is we know that there is no magic, maybe this is the wrong metaphor, but magic pill. There is no one partnership or one adoption that will magically make us a leading player in the US market. I think it really is a set of incremental steps that is getting us there. And we've always taken a very kind of deep partnership approach. So we are approaching the market in several ways. We are working, or we'll be announcing very soon a partnership we have with a at-home reading partner with which we will be working through districts to reach students at home for summer reading and during the school reading. We have other partnerships that are around data security, so making sure we're integrated with the right platforms so that we're keeping in mind data security, making sure we have the right integrations with LMS platforms that are most commonly used in districts. So there's sort of the partner layer to that. And then there's the next layer, which is actually interfacing directly with districts and directly with decision makers, and that typically looks like a pilot program where we actually allow a school or group of schools to use our platform and really see them use it. in their schools. I always say that the U.S. market, well, of course, it's much more like 50 markets. Each state has its own system, and some of the states are larger, and the decisions made in those states maybe impact what other states' decisions are made. Similarly, there's larger districts which impact smaller districts, but it's actually not unlike other markets in the world in the sense that even if let's take Southeast Asia, for example, I may have 30 schools in Indonesia, and you travel north on the map to Thailand, and they're not really interested to know what we've done in Indonesia. They want to know what we've done in Thailand so far. And so I think you have the same dynamic. It's a natural dynamic here in the US, which is schools, want to know something closer to their context, how has this been implemented? And so that's why pilots have been so important and continual part of our strategy.
Oh, that's fantastic. In terms of developing pilots, do you feel that there are any downsides to providing a pilot program to a school?
I think that you have to be very specific in a couple of ways. One is you have to obviously be prepared for onboarding schools. I think that's just sort of a baseline. But any product that has maybe succeeded in other markets, they should have that. So you have to have a customer success team that is ready to provide a dedicated support member. These are kind of basic components that need to be in place. But you also need to have clarity on how you're defining the successful outcome of the pilot. So what are we focused on? Are we focused on what is the level of engagement? And there may be multiple KPIs, key performance indicators. What are the level of engagement amongst the teachers and students? Were they successfully able to roster their students and assign books? How much reading did the students do? What was their performance on the comprehension tests? So it's important to really clearly outline that. I've also found that it's important to go into it and making sure that the pilot audience has the capacity to do a pilot. Because sometimes what you find is you might have a decision maker who takes a quick look and loves your program, loves your platform, and they have their teachers that they want to be in the pilot. But teachers have their own demands and lots of things on their plate. So even if they're an innovative teacher, they want to try new things. If they have a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day pilot, but they don't actually spend time in the platform, you might come away with a less than optimal outcome or reception simply because the teacher was busy or because there wasn't buy-in. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, I've actually found that often sometimes shorter pilots can be more effective because it's less of a burden on the people who are in the pilot. And typically over the course of 30 to 60 days, a school district or a group of teachers can decide pretty quickly if they can see value in what you're offering or not.
That's a really great suggestion. I've run pilots before, and what you just talked about resonates. Being specific, having those KPIs. Longer pilots can sometimes get lost in the weeds, so keeping it short, keeping it very specific, often has a higher success rate. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
It's it's easy to get caught up in your product, right? And being in love with your product, what it can do for the students, but being able to actually implement and getting it into a school and having it be effective with the classroom, with the teacher and the students is a whole nother ball of wax, right? It's a challenge. As
Mhm.
much as you believe in your product, you can't believe and make the results happen for the classroom. So, how do you set it up for success is really
Yeah.
key. So as you start to develop market share here in the US, do you have active clients and active pilots going on at the same time, and are you kind of rolling that process forward? Um,
Mhm.
is that how you're approaching the market?
Yeah, we do. And I don't want to give too many specifics on the call, but we have several different pilots running on both coasts of the country. I'm based in North Carolina, so we have a couple pilots on this coast and in this area. But the other advice I give, or the approach that I've really taken, is um, sometimes working with smaller districts initially can be a great way to start. I worked for a former company about 10 years ago, and I remember we were very focused on sort of some key larger districts and getting pilots in those districts. So, I mean, there's many of them around the country, but Houston Independent School Districts is one that comes to mind. And we were really fixed on getting an adoption or getting, with that district. And while that is very important to have adoptions in those key districts, sometimes those districts might not be the best places to start an initial pilot. And sometimes the best place to start is your own local school district. Going and talking to the librarian and understanding what types of resources they have, where are their pain points, really getting to know a school locally and what are their needs. So that's another thing that we've been focused on, is not sort of missing the forest for the trees, not just going for those larger school districts, but thinking about the smaller ones as well.
So let's pull the lens back a little bit, get a little broader, as we're going uh, from Europe to the US or from one state to another. One of the things that we talk about at EdGate is you know aligning standards and making sure that your content meets the requirements at the local level, understanding legislative requirements in order to at least present your product to that state, right? Or
Mhm.
district within a state. How is Booker looking at that? If you're, say, going from North Carolina to South Carolina, what are the things that you're doing first? What advice can you give to companies as they try to go from one state to another?
Sure. Well, I think it may be obvious, but it's important to know your audience. So it's important to do your research and talk to, well, of course, online research, but it's important to know the latest changes in that district or that state, to be updated on their latest standards. Again, bringing it back to the EdGate curriculum planner. If I'm switching from doing a presentation in North Carolina to doing one in Oklahoma, the benefit is um, I don't have to change anything about my platform. What I can do is tailor my overview of the platform to focus on that state. So that's actually, when it comes to getting our product out there and visibility, it makes the conversation a lot easier because it checks a box, right? It answers that one question. And sometimes there are certain key questions that put your audience at ease when you're in a presentation or if you're in a meeting. And usually those boxes relate to, does this company, do they really know me? Do they really know what my needs are? Do they really know what my state is going through right now? Do they know what my district is right now, is undergoing right now? So that starts with knowing what the standards are. That starts with using language that the local district or state uses to talk about reading. Knowing where that state stands on the science of reading, for example, or that school. So kind of, the basics of any sale is kind of knowing your audience and being prepared. Kind of having the answers to questions before they're asked. Um, but again, going back to my first experience in ed tech, one valuable lesson I learned, I remember in one of my first demos, I was working for a startup and we were presenting actually to Cambridge University Press. This is a tangent, but and I remember in that presentation, I give myself a B minus. It was not a great presentation. And in retrospect, I realized one of the downsides of it was I was trying to answer every question, or I was trying to act like what we offered was a solution to everything, if that makes sense. And I realized that was not the right approach. It's okay in meetings to say, you know, maybe let me get back to you. Let me speak with my academic team and get back to you with an answer on that would really solve your issue. If it's an academic question, same with if it's a technical question. So I think when you're in meetings, the audience appreciates if you come with a certain level of kind of authenticity on that respect as well. So being prepared, but not implying that you're perfect and you know everything about their district. You're there to learn as well.
It's a good time to mention EdGate does have a free tool I think it's a good utility. You might have dug into it, Will, online on their website is a standards comparison map, and it bases it off of, let's say, the Common Core and shows, moving from one state to another. Here's the amount of the Common Core that particular state is leveraging, so that you have some basis to understand where they are in their kind of in their preparation and utilization of standards. It also does a comparison of ESSER and other types of CTE standards, so you can start to draw some inference based on the maps and have some idea, so you can do some homework there.
Hmm.
When you get into the EdGate's exact tool, which is their standards alignment offering, it can get more specific with things like gap analysis and understanding from Alaska to Alabama, what is the gap? And you can actually plug in and do the alignment on your product and your curriculum, and then say, here's the gap, and this is what you need to fill in or change in order to be prepared to align to that state. So, these are things that companies can do
Hmm.
ahead of time to
Yeah.
be prepared, like you're saying.
Yeah, and that makes me think of another point, which is, that's a tool I don't think we've leveraged very much. It's also a reminder, especially with online products, with EdTech, is your product is never finished, Just like the standards are evolving, your learning of what is going on in the market is going to be constantly changing, and that's going to constantly impact how you design and build what you're building. And so, it is a falsehood that, you will build the perfect math product, and then once it's ready, you do your research on every state, and then you launch, and you go to market, and it just spreads like wildfire. The product is an iterative product process. The sales is an iterative process. Understanding the standards is also, iterative as well, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago who is in a similar position at a company, a global company, and they're really trying to break ground in the U.S. market. And he said one of their biggest challenges is cost of doing business. And so, as we go through, and because the US is 50 different fiefdoms of sorts that have different requirements and legislative kind of setup, that it does cost a lot of money to come into a market, and having to hire people and to put things in place. And if you're trying to chase down every standard, chase down every update to each standards, that can be very
Mm.
be cumbersome, right? Whether it's from a human resource perspective or from a cost perspective. And so I know EdGate, our role in the market, trying to understand those standards. We're trying to lower the cost of entry by handling that stuff. We do keep track of all those standard changes, and we update the repository. So when the alignments are done in the system, I don't think a lot of people know that it automatically updates the alignment. So if you've aligned within the exact system, and a standard changed over time, you don't have to really even be cognizant of that change,
Hmm.
because the system is automatically updating everything and updating your alignments, and you're good to go. So those are the little things that we do in the background. How are you looking at cost reduction and kind of process as you
Mm.
approach the market? Do you have a way of doing business that helps to keep costs down for a booker as you grow?
Yeah. Um, well, I think one way in which we're doing that is as I mentioned, sort of through a partner model. So we have several key partnerships that are going to expedite our growth in the next 6 to 12 months. So that's one way. we are not, expanding our sales team exponentially across all states. That is not our approach, because typically internationally we've worked through resellers. So, we're looking at, how do we work with partners? How do we work with potentially resellers? And then we'll be opportunistic about perhaps direct sales in certain markets, but that's not our core strategy. I think that's been true around the world. We sell directly to some international schools. Actually, we get quite a bit that come to us, kind of inbound opportunities. But for the most part, we rely on local partners around the world in different markets because they're the local experts, and they know their schools well. And so I think it also, in general, what I've seen of European ed tech companies is they have this sort of lean startup mentality as well. They're very efficient. They're very smart with how they spend their resources. They tend to be more focused. So I've experienced that at Booker as well. There's many things we could be doing, but we're staying very focused in our particular lane. Of course, we're also, there's other efficiencies. As with everyone, we are, using or looking at AI and how that can create efficiencies. But we actually, part of our core value is we're creating content by humans for humans. So we're integrating some AI into what we do, but that the core of what we do is sort of creativity and coming up with content that is created by our content team. So I covered quite a few topics, but talked a little bit about efficiency in different areas.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you know, kind of as you touched on, advanced technology it's another interesting area because I know a lot of companies, if you go out to the ASU GSV summit, which is coming up in April, you'll see the air show, which is delving into AI, and there's probably going to be 200-300 companies that exhibit that all have some kind of AI component to their product.
Hmm.
As much as people talk about it, I wonder if AI is a lead or is it an add-in. And what I mean by that is, does the product generate directly from the use of AI, or is it something that can augment or help improve a product? Do you have an opinion on that, Will, and how it can play into the market?
Yeah. I think in the particular category of products we are in, because we're dealing with literacy and because we're dealing with, at its core, creating reading content, and because we have a sort of a unique format or a way we approach it, we are leaning into kind of human creation as much as possible. Again, there's ways in processes that, we create efficiencies, but our content and our core offering is not AI driven. We have built-in AI features into the teacher experience and the student experience. For example, our book recommendations are driven by an AI engine. When a student reads a book, the follow-on recommendations are AI driven. Same on the teacher side, there are some capabilities that a teacher has that are implementing AI to do something in seconds that a teacher previously would take their whole evening to do. For example, creating a comprehension test or a quiz based on a bespoke set of titles.
Yeah.
My mom was an elementary school teacher, a reading teacher. She taught reading recovery, and I remember her creating flashcards and creating unique exercises every year on the same unit, and those types of things are done by AI. There are plenty of more and more, there are products out there that are specifically AI driven, but I see really the AI will be sort of an assistant or a sidekick, both to products and to students as we move forward, as opposed to sort of the protagonist in the story.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. It's not the product isn't AI. It's something that can augment and help. I know as we were looking at how do we EdGate is based, they're 27 years old, and the core of the product is really the way in which they do their alignments or correlations. And there's a methodology there that they've over time developed patented approaches to doing that work. And initially it was done by humans, and then they started to build in economies and how can we use technology in order to improve this process. And today they have this concept on advanced technologies that it's applied in specific places in order to get you to where you want to go quicker or better with more efficiency. And it's pretty thoughtful. And I think that's it's a nice approach to advanced technologies, because I think you can get lost in the wow factor of, hey, we have all this advanced tech. All these companies that are out there, that I think you have to be conscious of at the end of the day, how does it improve the quality of what you're delivering to your end customer? What's their reaction? How are they learning more? How are they, how is it improving the classroom experience, et cetera? And it sounds like Booker has a pretty thoughtful approach to applying the technologies that are out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I think about my experience just as a consumer and all the apps I use, and I think the AI, I mean, of course I use I use ChatGPT in a very specific way. In some ways I use it like I would a Google, but in a more complex way. But in terms of products that have deployed AI, it's really the ones that have done it in a subtle way that have been the most effective. So, you know, why I go to Facebook doesn't all of a sudden change. My reason for using Facebook doesn't change just because AI exists now. So I'm not going to Facebook because there's some AI feature in there. I don't care about a feature, but I do care about what is my experience being able to search or discover certain groups or certain content. And so it's when AI or any technology is implemented in a subtle way to enhance what you're already doing that I think it's kind of most powerful. And so I think it'll be interesting. ASU+GSV right now, there's an AI section, but 5 years from now, is it going to be a separate section of the event? Probably not. It'll probably just be, it would be like having a online section, you know, of a fair 30 years ago. At the time it was innovative, and then it just sort of became a part of our existence. So
It really has. I think about early in my career building some websites and how that process would occur and what's happening today and how much different it is. It was such a novel thing to create a website and to, do everything by hand and to design and to build out, structures and then create this thing that would exist online in this new place, which was the internet. And today,
Mhm.
it's just everything's becoming much more automated. You have assistants and chat bots, and the way you search for information has just changed
Yeah.
tremendously. Um, just reeling back a little bit, we did a couple weeks ago, Will and I were on a podcast, on a webinar together called Aligning New Markets. And we had some of these conversations, and today we're getting a chance to dig in a little bit deeper on some of the topics that were covered on that webinar. So I do want to mention to the audience, check out the YouTube channel, the EdGate YouTube channel. The webinar is up there. You'll see Will and myself as we talk through with our other panelists. But Will, in terms of aligning new markets, and let's say, because you came out of Budapest, you were talking about the company kind of evolving. When they
Mhm.
first stepped into the market, they were really stepping into Europe first and then coming to the US. Do you
Mhm.
have, was there any process back then, as you went into the European market? How did you get to one country to the next? What was some of the process you went through?
Yeah, well, I would say it started even more locally. It started with the local Hungarian market. So the initial creation was how do we engage students in Hungary even more? So initially it was in Hungarian language, and then it was how do we create this same exciting level of engagement and comprehension through literacy in English language learning? So expand it a little more. And actually today we have an English version. We also have a BOOKR Schule, which is a collection of German titles. And that was based on a market demand or request in the region. So the way we kind of initially expanded was similar to what I've talked about as our strategy in the US. It was a combination of making connections at the ministry level or at the government level, kind of to understand what are the standards or the needs in different markets. So our CEO is a part of a European EdTech Female Founders Alliance. That's been an important part of her network and kind of building connections across Europe through female founders. And then building a mix of partnerships, some of which are for in the tutoring space for at-home learning. In Italy and Germany, we have some tutoring partnerships. And then also finding people who reach, school consortiums or networks, whether that's agents or resellers. So it's really been a mix of things. And I will say that, that's part of the challenge is you have to, as a small company, we're not that small anymore, you have to both follow the opportunities, but you have to, manage your and be choosy about who you work with. And so some of that is just knocking on a lot of doors, but then having a good feel for who's a good partner, who's going to help you scale. But I think if our CEO were on this call right now, she would talk to, be very proud of the fact that she has multiple partners who she's been working with for 6, 7, 8 years, both in Hungary and also throughout Europe. And I think that's a sign of a company that's really established themselves and built trust through their
Mhm.
partnerships.
So as you look at, the future, so put the lens on, 25 and 26 and 27, what defines success as you align new markets
Mhm.
for Will Gordon and for Booker?
Wait, what year did you say?
Well, going forward, you
Yeah.
can pick them. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you had a future lens. Let's say
Yeah.
2026. What's defining the success and how
Yeah.
you get there?
I think in the coming 2, 3 years, I think we want to expand. US is a big part of our goal and our growth. This year globally, we're planning to double the number of countries we're in, the number of partnerships we have. We're matching that with really leaning into our current partnerships and growing them. And so I mentioned we're focused in the US, but we have a very large partnership in Brazil. I'll be headed to Brazil in about a month. And often the quickest path and the most meaningful path to growth is the partners you've already obtained or the districts you've already obtained, because that district will use your resource this year, but your goal is to have them use it for 3, 5, 8 years in a row. So let's say 2 years from now, the end of 2026, my hope is that we are in all or most of the 50 states. We have multiple levels of partnerships. We have direct sales to schools, but we also are focused on at-home reading. Perhaps we've even, in some specific cases, worked on creating some printed books for libraries to supplement online reading because we are platform agnostic. We want kids to read whether they're online or offline. So those are some of the initiatives and directions I would love to see us go in the next 2 years.
Well, it sounds like for the son of two reading specialists, you've really done an amazing job, Will, of opening up this market, and we're certainly proud to be a partner in that process at EdGate, and we wish you much success. Is there anything that you would want to say in closing to the audience that might help them to reach that same level of success and their business?
Um, Reach the same level of success. I think, like I said, there is no script to this. We are writing the script. Each company's writing their own story. So it's very hard to be prescriptive about exactly how that path should be. Something that resonated with what you just said, mentioning my parents. I think it's important to remember that the hardest job in the world is teaching. And so I think the more you can be appreciative of how hard that is, maybe the next hardest job is to be a student. That's pretty hard. My 8-year-old comes home pretty tired every day. She's put in a long day of work. So I think having that, that reminder or that level of empathy for teachers and for students and what they're doing every day, is really important every step of the way is even as you get in conference calls and product roadmap meetings and sales pitches, not to lose sight of who you're creating it for and the respect, how much respect, we do have for them and the work they do. So
No, thank you for that, Will. And I would agree. My wife's a teacher, and I see, it really is it's a 24/7 job that, I mean, I see that she could work straight through without stopping, and often she tries to until I tell her she's got to stop. It's just
yeah,
amazing. There's just never a drop in the level of effort that has to go into it in order to be good at what you do. And
yeah,
I think people
totally.
keep dumping things on teachers because they feel like maybe they don't have enough to do, but that hasn't been my experience, and clearly not yours either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Well, thank you for your time today, Will. Love having you aboard, and we look forward to future
Thanks.
partnerships.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak anytime. It's been good to talk on this topic and thanks so much.
Our pleasure.